Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
Steve Zacharias, you are here, and people they know what the conversation is. Some of them are actually anxious themselves, and they're wondering, like, how do I have a fruitful conversation with my anxious self? Because I'm going to youth group right now, and I've got grade 7 boys, and I don't know what's going on. I got these grade 10 girls, like, anxiety's welling up in me, but they're certainly thrilled for this. So for lots of people, of course, know you, Steve, and you're part of our crew and your team. But what I am not what I'm most grateful for, but one of the things that I'm very grateful for you is that you think thoughtfully about the issues in our ministries to the next generation around emotional intelligence, around mental health. And because this is such a massive, what would I say? It's talked about massively. When I say mental health, there's probably not a person that hasn't obviously heard that term. And yet, if you go back 40 years and say that, nobody would have any sweet clue what you're talking about. And so, or not many people would have a sweet clue what you're talking about. So, talk to me a little bit about what sparked your interest specifically in this one, fruitful conversation with an anxious teen, not just your mental generally. Like what got you to, because you said, hey, I think I've got something that could be helpful for our youth workers. When did you start thinking about this particular thing?
Having lunch with a very anxious student. And I had the opportunity to ask the question, what's it like for you to have lunch with me today? And he opened up a whole new world of thought that I just never thought of. Because, Jeremy, I always thought of myself as really fun and upbeat and stuff like that. And I remember his response was completely overwhelming. And I wasn't prepared for that. And I was like, oh, I think I need to learn more. In fact, it started a process where I started to ask more questions around this sort of thing. And I remember one student actually saying, hey, Steve, could we actually have a lunch together? We could go out for lunch together and nobody talks. I'm like, that would make me anxious. Let's do it.
Wait, did you really do that?
I committed to it because I was bound and determined for students who are really wrestling with anxiety and those sorts of things to teach me about their life experience. Yeah. And I wanted to try some hard things. I wanted to understand them. Coincidentally, while he challenged me that we would sit in silence the whole time, he talked my ear off the entire half hour that we were together. We put a small bookend. He didn't want to stretch me out for a whole hour. He's like, I think you can manage half an hour of silence. So let's do that. And so we had designed this whole experience that we were going to do together. And as a result, he actually just unloaded, which was beautiful. I didn't have to actually go through with the silent treatment. But anyway, you asked what sparked and those experiences.
So go back to like that. So the anxious teen, because I think there's some youth workers, probably most youth workers that aren't me, are like, when I think about anxious teens, I kind of understand, like, it's hard to have a fruitful conversation. And then there is the naive people like myself who's like, come on, nobody's nervous to talk to me, and I'm super easygoing, and this is wonderful, and I get people have anxiety, but what's the deal with this conversation? So what did you learn about conversations with students that maybe would struggle to have them?
You're right. Let's set a little bit of groundwork here, Jeremy, because as you were saying that, it just brings back memories to myself, because I was that person too. I was like, hey, I'm fun in the foyer. And some of the different responses I would get from students, I'd often classify in my mind as like, oh, that was bad behavior, or this, that. Or even worse yet, sometimes the ways they responded to me made me feel like, oh, maybe I've gotten too old for this, because they clearly don't like me anymore, or this, that. And so there's a lot of times when I would just kind of take that on myself and say, there must be something wrong with me. But in actuality, it was just more a part of anxious people just being anxious people. And so let me just take us to the foyer for a moment. And I wonder if we can identify some of these kids and the anxious behaviors that come out in conversations, the responses. Because we all know, right? When a person is experiencing anxiety, it's element of perceived threat. And the natural response, we've heard the 4 F words before, right? Not those ones, no, but the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, right?
Well, I haven't heard fawn. What's fawn?
You haven't? Okay. Yeah, that one is just kind of
is that people a new have been one?
Talking. It's relatively new. Yeah.
Because fight or flight. Fight or flight, I feel like everybody's got. And then freeze felt like it was a new one. That dropped in at some point. Okay, but what's fawn?
I really love fawn too. Fawn is kind of the kid who tells you what you want to hear. Or I respond to my anxiety by pleasing those around us, making the peacemakers.
Yeah.
Hey, this is where I find a lot of my anxious, outlet coming. I get funny when I get anxious.
Yeah.
It's an element of it's not, I'm not fighting. I'm not fleeing. Goodness, I love to jump into the spotlight when I'm anxious or whatever. And if I can make you like me, I feel safer, right? And so it's a bit of a fawning sort of response.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. I got it.
Okay, so these are the kids that are in our foyer, right? The kid who will have a fight response. Jeremy, have you ever had a kid mock you openly, attack you in some way? So
yeah.
Wait,
is this a rhetorical question? Sorry. You keep going.
Maybe you've got a better story than me.
No, you got one. Go ahead. You open up and share your own secrets. Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy, I was at a conference and one student looked at me and I was wearing pink shoes, like bright pink Nikes, and she looks at me and says, "Really? Pink shoes?" Meanwhile, she's wearing a sombrero and carrying a squishmallow, and I'm like, for a moment though, I felt so judged.
Yeah, sure.
And I was just like, oh, it was this attack. Her and I, we became really good friends by the end. And looking back, this was an element is, I'm going to test the friendship here. I feel unsafe in this moment, insecure in this moment. And I'll take a swing at you to see what your response is. Because I'll be safest if I am, in a strength position. So I'll be the strength sort of the flex was mocking my pink shoes. Anyway,
interesting.
I wonder if you've ever had students that kind of take that little jab.
Yeah.
And if you ever experience that and you go, oh man, I'm not good enough as a youth worker.
Right. But instead, what if that's their anxious response?
Yeah. It's just their anxious response. It's them. It's just them telling you in a weird love language sort of way, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because there's also those that will actually maybe. Okay, so I often say too, like sometimes the shocking things students will say to us is almost to prepare for the fight as well.
Okay.
Jeremy, this might be a part of the podcast we might delete afterwards, whether or not you feel this is an appropriate example. But I remember one student, you ask, so what do you see yourself doing after high school? And he says, I think I'm going to be a grade 7 sex ed teacher for junior high girls.
Right.
It's like, oh, you're testing my response in this moment, right? Because, let's be real. I knew whatever. Now, a lot of the other adults in the room, I said how inappropriate that was. Mm-hmm. But there was a speculation or a suspicion in my mind that it's like, oh, this sounds a little bit like, I prepare for, oh, you're just going to be another adult that will correct me. That's like, you got a fallback plan? Because I'm like, he wanted to catch me on my heels, right? But I knew that students typically tell me what I want to hear, or they tend to do something shocking to see if I'll treat them like every other adult in their life.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Had just a couple of those kind of canned responses in the back of my mind for those kids that will prepare for the fight, right?
Yeah.
It's an anxious response, I think. Now, I could be wrong. There's an expert out there saying, oh, Steve, you've got no idea. Maybe I'm using the wrong terms.
Well, you've clarified enough of what that is. So whether or not the term anxiousness or the term, threatened or whatever that term is. But the truth is that I think for all of us listening that have been in ministry for any length of time, we can recognize these kinds of moments, these kinds of responses. And so for many of us as youth workers, the question is like, what am I supposed to do with that? Because for a lot of us, it's like, I can only do what I'm meant to do if they're all sitting and paying attention and looking at me, and then we can do real ministry, right? Do you know what I mean? Like until everybody's quiet and I can get through these questions, like this is the only way that spiritual formation is going to happen, is if we get to the end and everybody tells me the truth. But maybe that's not always the case, right? Or I guess that's
right?
That's my. But what's your sense in the midst of that? Because again, I think about the teams that I've led and the many different volunteer youth workers. God bless them for all the time. And sometimes it's honestly, and I'm trying to convince myself as much as them, hey, our expectation about the way that kids are going to act or react to our leadership and our spiritual guidance is going to be dramatically different. And yet it doesn't change the fact that we do want to wade in and offer some type of, like you say, have a fruitful conversation.
Right.
And so what would be a different approach other than just trying to get them to conform to our behavioral standards?
Right. Which, Jeremy, isn't that a part of our own anxious responance? Wanting someone to conform makes us feel a little bit better.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So I think that's one of the things is just understand how to regulate ourselves. Because sometimes it's our own anxiety that's bringing anxiety into the room. Let's just be there.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is two things that we do to prepare for the conversation, and then I'll give us a whole bunch of conversational prompts that I feel are helpful in just talking with students. But so first of all, just basic understanding of what anxiety is all about. In 10 seconds or less, we recognize anxiety is about this element of perceived threat. And like you said earlier on too, as youth workers, we often don't see ourselves as a threat at all.
Right.
And so we just move into the conversation as though we've got this green light for going deeper, because we know that we're safe people. We know what our intentions are. We know what the outcome is that we want. We just want them to feel loved. But we know that even love can feel kind of threatening at sometimes. Sometimes students just kind of go, hey, I don't know what to do with this adult interest in my life because I've never had an adult actually take interest in me. And so I'm just feeling overwhelmed in this moment.
And I wonder even if we think as youth workers to like our own spiritual journeys of like somebody asks you to pray, like, hey, in your leader huddle, and they're like, oh, Steve, why don't you pray? And all of a sudden you're like, ooh, that feels like a perceived threat because I didn't know I was supposed to, right? So it creates a response. And even though it's not a bad thing or a wrong thing, it's actually not a threat. It feels like it because it spins us onto. So I'm with you in terms of like, okay, the response to a perceived threat, which can, depending on who you are and where your students have been, can come from all different angles. That's interesting.
So we often just assume that there's a green light response to going deeper in conversation. We got to understand that the green light isn't assumed.
Okay.
As we're responding to all of these anxious responses, whether it be the fight responses that mock us or whatever, shock us or, those sorts of things, whether it be the flight responses where, the students ghost us, and don't actually respond to our repeated attempts to reach out to them, or if they just tell us what we want to hear so that we'll go away or whatever it might be. Just recognize that the green light for deeper conversation isn't an assumed, it's earned.
Yeah, that's good.
So we'll ask some questions in a way that inch us in towards the green light. But also back to something we were just talking about too, is we also need to learn how to regulate our own anxiety. And we sometimes don't even notice it. Jeremy, when I am looking to fix a situation, fixing the situation or the problem is often an anxious response as well. Why am I so uncomfortable with what it is right now that I feel like I got to fix this right here, right now? So I just kind of think about like, what's my posture coming into this? Am I calm? What presence do I bring? What's the posture? What's the pace of conversation that I bring? Can I slow it down? Can I enter into a conversation of 30 minutes of silence, knowing that that's probably the best investment I can make in a conversation with a kid who's really wrestling through their anxiety? Before that challenge, I would have never thought of that as part of my pace. You know? So I'm just thinking through that, and I'm going to regulate my own anxiety first. If God's going to just use me in conversation, would he use me as much if I was just dead silent the whole time and just listened? Would I feel used by him if I didn't say anything at all? I think actually that's what some of our students actually need more. So when I start to feel like I need to fix the situation, that's probably an indicator that I just need to take a breath and regulate my own self. I want to also regulate some of the environment as well. Just recognize that the foyer might not be the best place to have an intimate relationship because the music is pumping and there's people all around. And some of these things in themselves can be a real catalyst for anxiety. It's the thing that you and I love the most, right? We love the party. And so this is our element where we feel most free. But for some other students, it's where they feel absolutely most overwhelmed. And so letting them choose the environment of the conversation as well.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just learning how to invite them into that conversation.
Yeah. So yeah, where do you want me to ask a bunch of like, are those prompts here, or do you want me to go back? Cause I'm still kind of stuck on a little bit. And for some of us, like, okay, we're not always on a green light. And so, but that's okay. And probably maybe red light, green light isn't exactly it. Like there's realms of safety for our kids, or there's realms of acceptance where it's not wrong to kind of push a little bit, but just recognize like a brand new kid that just showed up. And if you're like, hey, when's the last time you sinned and how bad was it? It's like, yeah, you probably didn't earn the right to that question. Like that's going to create something really.
That's a really good example.
You know what I mean? But if you're in like, man, guys accountability, and like my small group was this morning, and like, Jamie that's in there, like we grew up together, we're in middle school together. And so like we can just have like really straight shooter questions and conversations about what it's like to be a dad and a husband today. And that nature of like, oh, we've earned that with each other over the long haul, trying to have some self-awareness to know and to recognize if you're getting pushback, maybe where that's coming from. That's a beautiful gift. And then if you're connecting it to yourself, in terms of, not connecting to yourself, but like if you're recognizing in yourself what you've brought to the conversation, I think just those two things, youth workers on their way to youth group right now are like, hey, this is lots. This is a lot for me just to process in this moment. Yeah. And then what would you like to give them in terms of like an extra tool or thought process?
Right. Because you bring up some really great points, Jeremy. Sometimes we feel pressured to go deep immediately.
Right.
And I'm going to give you some questions that will go to deep levels of intimacy in the conversation. But this is all working on the assumption that we've done a tremendous amount of legwork on just building trust.
Okay.
And one of the things that I find most commonly, let's take, for instance, you get into your small group time and you want to go into a deep conversation. And a lot of youth workers just kind of feel like, oh, my discussion time was a failure because we didn't get to the real gold. Sometimes those times are just the investment of building trust and listening to the whatever random small talk that you make, because this is where we're earning the right to speak into some of those places. And it takes time, like Jeremy, I've imagined that I do okay at conversations, but then I think back to my own discussion times, and there was very few times where we went to real depth in those conversation times. And there was more often where we talked about absolute nonsense just to prove that I was interested in them and wasn't going to correct them all the time and redirect them to the conversation I wanted to have. Let's talk goofy stuff. But then when we do get to that place and we want to move into something that's deeper after we've built trust, let me just frame up two types of questions. I think of them as my fueling questions. What's fueling my anxiety? And then my flip questions. What's the alternative narrative to this as well? Okay. So I want to draw out, the fuel question it's an exploration. Tell me more about what's going on the inside of you And rather than correct it, because I think we've all had someone quote to us, the passage in Philippians, be anxious about nothing and that sort of thing. It's so tempting for us just to want to fix the problem and correct it. Instead of that, how do we help the student just to flip that narrative from within them without correcting them? So that's kind of the ambition. Fuel questions and then flip questions.
Okay, so when you say fuel, you mean to questions that reveal
yes
the anxious points in a teenager's life. So you fruitful conversation with an anxious teen, you've got questions that kind of help us determine where that anxiousness is coming from. Is that what you're saying?
Right. What is fueling this feeling that I have right now?
Okay. So
because they might even not have awareness of the fact that I'm feeling it. And so we'll explore what's fueling it.
Right. Okay, so tell me more about what's going on inside of you. I love that one.
Tell me, what are you feeling?
Yeah. Do you want to?
How do you feel about talking to me right now?
It's a great question.
If you really want to know.
Do you want to rip through your others, or is that the one? And because I want to plumb the depths of the question itself. But are there others that we want to put on the table?
Yeah, let me toss a few questions here. I'll just have a moment to pause.
Okay.
And then we can circle back to each of them. So what are you feeling?
Okay.
Everyone asks you how you're doing.
Yeah.
I like to just ask an adjacent question that doesn't get me a response of fine.
Yeah.
What are you feeling? How do you feel about talking to me right now?
Okay.
What is it like for you to feel this way? When did you start feeling this way? What was going on at the time? Tell me more. Or what else? Hey, what were some of the biggest problems you were trying to solve in that? Okay, so we're getting to the depth of conversation. Maybe we need to circle back because some of those were building questions. Let's go back to what is it like for you to feel this way?
Yeah.
It's kind of a follow-up to how does that make you, or a replacement of how does this make you feel or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's this sort of premise that I think that our culture has a lot of emotional language without a lot of emotional understanding or intelligence. And I want to just help students just to take inventory of a lot of these things. They might be able to articulate what they're feeling, but they might not actually know what that means for them. And just tell me what it's like for you to feel this way.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an exploration of all the sensory stuff that's going on for me. One student says, I feel when I walk in the doors of youth, it feels fuzzy. Like the old school bunny ears television sort of stuff. I feel this sense of fuzziness come over me. What's it like for you? It's completely overwhelming. I want to escape. Oh. When did you start feeling this way? What was going on in life? A lot of times these things have other roots. And Jeremy, one of the things I find is anxiety tends to manifest when we do have a bit of a sense that there's enough security in the moment that I could reveal some of this, or I need to shut it down, or it just feels uncomfortable and stuff. So, if I can start to ask hey, when else have you felt this way? I can start to make connections with the student of other parts of their story as it relates to the here and now. Mm-hmm. And those are the things of greater depth. We often move into the assumption that we know what's going on for a student, but there's probably 15 layers of other things that are contributing to the moment that they're in right now. That I want to have as much understanding of those sorts of things. Because, often students will just grab the first thing that comes to mind is I'm just feeling overwhelmed by the test. And you'll do great. Have you studied? And I'm focusing on all that. But Jeremy, that wasn't the source of the anxiety. It might have actually been the fact that, they had a conflict with a friend, or there's tension at home. But they just knew that you would respond to the test thing. And that was the comfortable thing. So that's where I'm asking some of those things. When did you start to feel this way? And we're getting to the depths. What else was going on? And tell me more. And what else? Because it's probably 15 layers underneath.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing with all that stuff is that it reminds me that if I'm getting asked those questions, I don't necessarily even know where the answers are coming from. And what I mean by that is that I think even for our students, if they can usually articulate and use, in, like you said, emotional language for sure, but they probably don't have an emotional understanding of even themselves. So as they're responding to some of these things, lots of it, although they'll have words perhaps for it, it's not like it's coherent, or it's not like it's a fully formed understanding of themselves. And so part of our perhaps our job in caring for our students is helping them even piece together some of the things that they might be feeling and experiencing. Because when it comes to things of like, even when we get to faith and when we get to, as we're into the scriptures or these messages, you'll find like, man, you're coming up against like a stronghold. It seems like they can't quite get this, or they're not in for this. And they might present as like, oh, the reason is because, this intellectual thing or this other thing. And you're like, oh, but that probably isn't actually the real issue. They might present it as the issue, but there's clearly other things that are much deeper going on, and being curious can kind of uncover those things.
Right. And a word that you said too is it's not always coherent.
Yeah.
And that's such a great point, because sometimes coherence comes from us just verbally processing.
Oh, there you go.
And in our own anxiety, we sometimes want to correct. When we see something that's incoherent, we want to bring cohesion between it. But if I'm anxious, I'm probably not really accessing my logic, my best logic. That's one of the things that anxiety makes a disconnection with. And so they're not even hearing, my wisdom as I'm fixing the problem. So better than fixing their problem is just guiding the conversation to let them process till they do come around to some level of coherence. So exploring all the fuel is what's giving me the cues as to what we might talk about on the flip side of the questions.
Yeah.
As I start to understand the depth of what they're feeling. Now, let's flip it around and let's let this student who's emerging on some level of coherence, let them solve their own problems. Because my advice might feel threatening, but the advice that they will give to themselves might feel less threatening. And so I might actually get to enter into a more coherent conversation if I get them talking rather than me talking.
And so, what are some of those questions that you might use?
Okay, so, so like if I want to get the flip script, let's correct without correcting. Imagine you could swap places with someone else. What, or who would you choose to change places with in the scenario that you just described? And if you're looking through their eyes, what do you see in this scenario? And we're just working through all of that stuff. And if you're looking through the eyes of Jeremy McDonald, what would you want to ask you? So now I'm just leveraging their own imagination to answer their own questions. Because let's be honest, Jeremy, have we ever said anything that's like brand new to students that they haven't heard from another source? All you need to do is be a parent of a teenager, and they come home one day and they're like, they had this revelation. And it's like, I just unlocked all the secrets of the universe. And I was like, man, have I not been saying that exact thing your entire life?
Yeah, fair
Sometimes
enough,
they just need a different voice, and it's best when it's their own, I think. So imagine you could swap places with someone else in this situation. As you're describing this hard situation that you're in, imagine you could swap places with someone else. Who would you swap places with? And what would they be seeing? What would they want to ask you? What would you see? And they might give themselves some really interesting advice. Hey, Jeremy, another question that I like to ask students as they're getting to this place of coherence is, hey, all the pressures that you're feeling in this, the causes of this anxiety, whose voices do you attach to that pressure? Whose voice do you hear? Let's say, for instance, kid is stressing about a test. As you are thinking about, the pressure that you feel to perform well on this one, whose voice do you hear putting that pressure on? Sometimes they might project it onto others, like, oh, my parents are saying this, or my teachers are saying this. But most times it boils down, it's their own voice. And, if I want to flip that, it's like, oh, man, it sounds like you've been really hard on yourself. Just knowing that right now, what else would you like to tell yourself? What would you really want to say to you? That's usually when the conversation goes quiet for a little bit, when they start to realize that they're their own worst critic. And see, now if I can help them identify some of that, because it's those narratives that spin in people's minds that just perpetuate the anxiety, right? And so if they can start to identify some of those voices, I find that is often helpful. That's when I like to ask a question like, hey, how do you experience Jesus in this moment? What would you imagine him saying? And as they kind of they walk around something, sometimes Jesus will say things in their minds. We'll see they would think that he might be critical or whatever. And I'd ask, how did you come to that conclusion? What led you to believe that he would be on the side of the voices of criticism? Is that how you often experience God? What else might Jesus say? When you look at scripture, what did he tend to say to people who are wrestling with things like you're wrestling with right now? And now they're accessing those. I'm not correcting them. They're working around that. And even if I do feel I need to correct, I might just say, hey, have you ever thought of the woman at the well? And when Jesus, interacted with her, what was his response to her? How might that relate to your situation? And you might read it together with them or something like that. See, I'm trying to avoid just preaching to them and getting them, because again, as soon as that adult voice comes over top of it, it starts to feel threatening. And their own voice can be a little more palatable.
I love this. The idea that as youth workers, we could find ways to speak into what we see being revealed is it feels a little bit like a 2.0 or like a 3.0. Like if you're a new youth worker, I'm wondering if maybe this feels challenging only because of all the group dynamics and the different people I'm trying to keep track of. If there's somebody feeling nervous about this, Steve, can you maybe give them some, I don't know, encouragement or release even the pressure that they might feel of like, whoa, this is a lot to try and wade into, or like this is a heavy responsibility. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I think this is helpful. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about a guy. So your first flip question. Imagine you could switch places with somebody. I'm like, oh, like I had a conversation with a guy, legitimately just very recently who was like having relational issues with somebody, and I'm like, oh, you need to you need to basically suck it up and figure out how to reconcile with this person, which I don't think did anything. But I'm like, oh, that's the question I should have used. Absolutely. So that he could see. And then even this, like, what would you imagine Jesus saying to you in this moment? Like clearly Jesus isn't going to say to you, oh, you should give the other person the finger and like walk away from the relationship, which is where he was at. And so all of that to say, these are the right things. How do you remember, maybe this is more of a meta question, how have you become curious enough to discover these things so that for our youth workers listening, they'll take a couple of these tools that they remember in the moment, but if they forget, what's the tone or the posture you would have them take with their students?
Yeah, Jeremy, and let's be real. Those who don't teach. And a lot of this is stuff I was like, oh man, I need to do that more or whatever. I'm not perfect at this either. But the reminder that I often give myself in these moments when I feel like, oh, I'm not hitting it or I'm failing at this, just the simple phrase, ask more questions. Ask more questions. Because the more I ask questions and the less I give advice, the deeper the conversation goes. Now, Jeremy, let's be real too. Why do I want to give advice? Because I feel anxious. I want to be seen. I want to be loved. And like I said, they just criticized the color of my shoes. They made a joke about my age. And all of these things are saying, you are not enough. And I believe it. But it's not true. This is just the anxious response of our teenagers. They want to have interested adults. And how do we demonstrate interest? We don't tell our stories, but that's what makes us feel seen. So I just need to be aware in myself as I'm feeling the failure. It might be fueled by the fact that I'm saying, oh, I feel like I'm failing because I'm not fixing the problem. Ask more questions. Now, Jeremy, I scripted out some questions that, maybe we might go, oh, I'd have never thought to ask that. Okay, well, so you might not have thought to ask that. Come back to this podcast and write down the questions that you like and discard the ones you don't. Or, if you want to have a conversation sometime about let's write 1,000 questions together, we can do that. But just find 2 or 3 that just work for you and go with that and just ask more of them. One other just life hack. If you can't remember all of the other script, if my question starts with what or how, it's probably going to be a better question than other question words. I find the question why with students with anxiety, why is a question that that calls into judgment my motivation. And so if I struggle with anxiety, I'll probably hear the question why as a bit of an attack. So that's where I just try to go, okay, if I want to ask a why question, I'll just try to reframe it with a what. So those couple of things, ask more questions, and the best questions start with what or how.
I love it. This is really helpful. And what I'm going to try to do is get some of these questions that you've highlighted as part of our show notes so that people can pull them right from there and can just kind of take a screenshot and save them. I think this is really, really wonderful. Fueling questions that kind of reveal the fuel of the anxiety, flipping questions to help us flip it around. And then ultimately, when you want to have a fruitful conversation with an anxious teenager, ask some more great questions, those what and hows. I think that's absolutely brilliant. As we kind of come in for a close here, is there any last words or anything that you want to make sure that we communicate to our youth workers before we let them go?
Yeah, just take a deep breath. Recognize that Jesus had great conversations with the people around. Just follow in the way that he's going. And it's like, Jesus, just let me be more like you. Help me engage these students as you would.
I think a deep breath before youth group tonight or this week or whenever you're serving volunteer youth workers is going to be a game changer. You should breathe more deeply. I like that. Good stuff, Steve. Well, thanks so much for giving us these insights. This is always helpful. And we put our show note or our contact info in the show notes. So if people want to ask further questions of you, they certainly can.
Let's do it.
And if they want to do a deeper dive into any of these kinds of things, your best bet is to come and hang out with us at the Coalition, which is where, Steve, you spend the most of your time. And so come chill with us for a couple of years, get your bachelor's, get your master's, and we'd love to do that. But otherwise, thank you for making an eternal difference, and we'll see y'all next time.